be releasing prayers after service today. So make sure if you have any prayers that you want to put in the prayer bowl, please do. We have a small ceremony immediately after service where we gather around in the parking lot, and our wonderful Reverend April does a blessing, and we burn the prayers and send skyward. So please join us if you can after that. Okay? Well, speaking of Reverend April, she's running around with a little bowl in her hand.
A little bowl.
Yes, yes. The altar looks wonderful and very harvesty. Thank you so very much. And many of you have attended April's retreats. You've heard her speak here before. April brings to us a feeling and a sense of the goddess that is within each one of us. Just because you happen to have been born male doesn't mean the goddess isn't a part of who you truly are, as much as Father God is here with us as females. So I want you to not only give April a really good round of thank you, but know that she's been working on this. She's one of these that plans on who she's going to have help and what she's going to say. And like most of us, she gets up on Sunday morning and goes, "What am I doing now?" if you haven't given a sermon, you probably missed out on that joyous feeling of fear. It's about 9:45, but please help me welcome Reverend April Lussier.
Yes, that's so true. Reverend Tom, my sponsoring minister, said there's always you do 3 talks: the one you prepare, the one you give, and the one you give on your way home in the car. That's so true.
Oh my God.
All right, so let's begin by me saying blessings and namaste. The divine in me honors the divine in you, and together we are all one. So even though it's always a challenge for me to do a talk, because I'm a ceremonialist, my work is around ritual and taking wisdom and incorporating it into kind of a holistic experience, body, mind, spirit. So coming here and doing a talk is kind of like, well, how do I do that? So today we're going to do it all. I'm going to do a talk, and we're going to do some ritual, and we're going to do some chanting, and I hope you'll get a sense of what ceremony can look like even when we're in a church service. I'm going to try to create that. So I'm going to start with sharing a little bit about her story of harvest time, and then a bit about the wheel of the year. You all have a wheel on one side, and if you don't, there are some extra papers. And then we're going to learn a chant about the life cycle and a smidgen about utilizing the wisdom of all that we share. And then we're going to do a grain harvest ritual. So let's get going. Blessed be.
Blessed be.
My face. So, you know, we live in an area that the seasons are quite subtle. And for me, that's a blessing because it requires my attention. You know, if you live in the Midwest or in Boston, it's like you don't even, you know, it's like it's everywhere. It tells you the seasons. But here we have to kind of be present and notice, which is always a gift when we can do that for ourselves. So as the sunlight begins to shorten and the crops have completed their life cycle, it's been a tradition to take time out to express our gratitude for harvest. This has been happening way before the Pilgrims landed on the East Coast. It's been called Thanksgiving by many, but it doesn't have to be named that to be connected to that energy of gratitude. Since times of old, the people all over Northern Hemisphere had a strong call to honor the gifts of Gaia's harvest at this time of fall equinox through celebrations and festivals. It's a time to celebrate the fertility of the land and the continued plentiful harvest, for harvest hasn't completed, we're just in the middle of the harvest time. And to appreciate the blessings of sustenance that the goddess of fertility provides. Honoring the gifts and the giver of fertility was recognized by many ancient cultures of the pre-monotheistic societies. Here are just a few. The African goddess of Ashanti, the Armenian goddess of Anahet, the Aztec goddess of Quetzalcoatl, the Celtic goddess Bridget, the Egyptian goddess Isis and the Nile goddess, the Germanic goddess Freya, the Greek goddesses Demeter, Gaia, Artemis, and Kor, the Hawaiian goddess Haumea, the Hindu goddesses Parvati and Lakshmi, the Inca goddess of Pachamama, the Inuit goddess Akina, the Mesopotamian goddess Inanna and Ishtar, and the early Roman goddess of Venus, the Slavic goddess of Ziva and Zimai, and the Native American and indigenous goddess of the rainbow snake goddess. So this is not new. This has been going on for eons. The fertility goddesses represent one of the main aspects of the mother archetype. Archaeological finds of the earliest goddess from around the world show her as the great mother goddess, the creatrix, depicted with large breasts and a swollen belly. And this is a replica of the Willendorf goddess, the Willendorf Venus. She was found in 1908 in Austria, and they feel that she was created approximately 28,000 BC. And the whole idea of really recognizing very early on that the capacity and the mystery of a woman's ability to create life and nurture it mirrored what the earth did for the society. So this is really considered quite a blessed honoring to be female and to be able to offer that to her community, to her village, by bringing in new life. And over time, there really was that connection that the earth and the land and her fertility was also the mother. So this is just another representation of how the mother and Gaia became one. And if you get a chance to come up and look at her, she's quite amazing. Her hair has all different kind of creatures in it, and it's quite a beautiful representation of that concept of Gaia and the women fertility and connection. So I'd like to share with you just a piece of recognizing one of the things about the divine feminine is really it isn't about all those of old. It's about recognizing that we each have a divine feminine aspect within us, just like we have a divine masculine aspect within us. You know, if we're faced in a situation that requires strength and you know, the masculine part of us shows up, the testosterone part of us shows up. If we need to be in a place of nurturing, then that estrogen part of us shows up. We have it both in our beingness. So it isn't about just images of the past. It's about looking at each of us and seeing the divinity within each of us. And this is a poem that kind of speaks to the expansiveness and the recognition of the unflowing change that is constantly happening, which we'll talk about in a minute with the wheel. This is called a core chant. Her name cannot be spoken. Her face was not forgotten. Her power is to open. Her promise can never be broken. All seeds she deeply buries. She weaves the thread of seasons. Her secrets darkness carries. She loves beyond all reason. She changes everything she touches, and everything she touches changes. Everything lost is found again, in a new form, in a new way. Everything hurt is healed again, in a new life and in a new day. So that truly represents what the concept of the energy of this aspect of the Divine Feminine. So with that, I wanted to invite us to learn a chant. I wanted to teach you a chant. And this is a chant that's used often at this time of season, but it's also a chant that our family has used when we've had to bury pets or loved ones. It helps us remember the cycle of life. So I'd like to teach it to you once, and then we sing it 3 times. And the reason that we chant in threes is because we chant for body, mind, and spirit. Again, that holistic, integrative kind of experience. So if you read something once, your brain might get it, but your being might not. And so this is why we do it in threes. So if you guys really are into it, since we have plenty of time, we can sing it 6 times. Who knows? Let's see where we go. So I'm going to teach it to you first. I'm going to sing it one verse first. I mean, the one time through first. And we all come from the goddess, and to her we shall return like a drop of rain, flowing to the ocean. Hoof and horn, all that die shall be reborn. Corn and grain, all that fall shall rise again. Got it? Yeah. We all come from the goddess, and to her we shall return like a drop of rain, flowing to the ocean. Hoof and horn, all that die shall be reborn. Corn and grain, all that fall shall rise again. The words are on your paper if you're curious. We all come from the goddess, and to her we shall return like a drop of rain, flowing to the ocean. Hoof and horn, all that die shall be reborn. Corn and grain, all that fall shall rise again. We all come from the goddess, and to her we shall return like a drop of rain, flowing to the ocean. Hoof and horn, all that die shall be reborn. Corn and grain, all that fall shall rise again. Shall we keep going? We all come from the goddess, and to her we shall return like a drop of rain, flowing to the ocean. Hoof and horn, all that die shall be reborn. Corn and grain, all that fall shall rise again. We all come from the goddess, and to her we shall return like a drop of rain, flowing to the ocean. Hoof and horn, all that The thing about a chant is it's like drumming, where at some point you get past tripping on the words and you start to align with the frequency and the energy of the statements. And the idea, if we can really, really drop into the trust and the belief system that death is not something to fear, but just something to embrace as a part of the cycle, we can really allow for a whole different perspective about living and about the life cycle. And so every year we get a chance to look at it again. It's not like we have to totally master it at any one point, but because we follow a cycle of the wheel, which I'll talk about later, it allows us to drop in and explore, how do I feel about that now? How is that different? Am I worried? Am I concerned? Have I lost someone and I'm feeling despair? And getting a chance to go, wait a minute, what's the bigger picture? What's it all about? So thank you for joining me, and I hope you'll take that song with you. Truly, it has been a gift, especially with the children, when there's an ending, like a pet, to bury it and to sing that song. It has made a huge difference in our family.
Blessed be.
Blessed be.
Okay, so I mentioned about the wheel, and there's several of these out there. Hopefully you all got one. If not, let me know. There's a couple extra on different chairs. So it's interesting. This is not my design. I took it off the internet. And what's interesting about this is that the part at the top should be Mabon and Selwyn. And what's pretty cool about this is that makes total sense, and I should change the perspective of how I have my wheel, because Mabon is Thanksgiving and Samhain is New Year, so it being at the top makes total sense. But anyway, this is the wheel, and the wheel consists of 4 solar high holy days. There's 8 high holy days total. 4 solar high holy days, which are the solstice and then the equinoxes. So Yule and Litha are the solstices, and Mabon and Ostara are the equinoxes. So the solstices are the extremes. The longest night is Yule, and the longest day is Litha. The Ostara and Mabon both are the times of equal, the same time of day and night. So those are the solar Sabbats, and then there are the cross-quarter Sabbats, and those are called the agricultural Sabbats. And there was a time that some societies and cultures honored one and some honored the other, and at some point the realization of putting together made a wheel in a way that one could celebrate and follow. Approximately every 6 weeks there is a Sabbath, and there's a movement in the wheel, and there's a movement in the season on the planet. And like I said at the beginning, it requires some focus and some attentiveness sometimes to notice the change. But what those of us who follow the wheel recognize is there's some great value to being present with that movement. In the practice I work with, there's a spot for each of the aspects of the beingness. So at Imbolc, it's birthing. So each season we get a chance to birth ourselves anew. And then at Ostara, it's about the small child, the little one, and the innocence that's there, and the loss of innocence. So we look at that. And then at Beltane, it's all about the sensual, sexual aspect of the beingness coming into their fullness and into their capacity of wonder, and the world is my oyster and I'm going to take it and be a part of that. And also the other side of that, if you had those years of your life and they were painful, then it's a chance to heal. So we get to look at that. And then at Litho, which is summer solstice, it's when Gaia is at her full capacity of life. And so that's the mother aspect or the parent aspect, where you've got family and you're taking care of, you're nurturing. It's really calling upon your nurturing aspect. And then also if you didn't get nurtured, to heal that. And then I call this Lammas, it's very hard for me to pronounce, and it's the time of the first harvest. And we make bread and we honor the grain, and we will be honoring the grain today. But the fact that these plants, all their existence comes from growing and being, you know, all they can be, and then they have to die. They have to be harvested for their purpose to be fulfilled. And we too, looking at those that we lose in that whole concept, it becomes it becomes a part of the cycle, and there's a instead of it being an anguish, there's actually a comfort of, right, that is how this all works. That's the agreement. And then Mabon is the fall equinox, which is the second harvest, more about fruits. And then Samhain is the third harvest, and that's also a combination of harvest time and connecting with the unseen world and honoring those that have come before us. And then Yule is about, for me, it's about pregnancy. It's about the potential that hasn't yet been defined that will come in spring. So that's what the wheel is about. And so you'll hear me often talk about the wheel has turned again and it's time for a gathering. And so I hope that that gives you a sense of it and can maybe even grasp the concept of the value of it to really be connected. Because Gaia is a mirror for us. We are her and she is us. Every part of us is from her. Yes?
I have a question. So is it possible then that the Christians took the Mary being pregnant during that time of year with the fulfillment of the
Exactly.
Christ being...
Exactly. Which is, exactly.
Did they not steal everything from somebody else?
Pretty much. But yeah. And in some ways, for me, it's like, well, that's kind of okay because, you know, the pagans don't own the power of the land. If the Catholics found a power site that was a pagan gathering site and built a church on it, it's like, well, they're kind of lining up and the divinity is going to rattle them for good, either, you know. So it's kind of like, but definitely the high holy days line up for exactly that reason, because there was an energetics that they connected to. So let's see. So the idea of she changes everything she touches, and everything she touches changes. It's a powerful chant that we also sing. And it's about really, it's such a conundrum, because we as humans, it's kind of like, once we get to where we want to be, it's like, okay, let's stay here. This feels really safe. This feels really good. I can predict my world. I can, you know, it's like, all right, I'll stay here. But that's not how this planet works. And truly, that's not how we work, because if we did that, we would stay stuck. We wouldn't grow and expand and be all that we can be. Because we all are a divine aspect that came here with the intention of being the most unique expression of divinity through our beingness. So being limited to a one moment in time experience is now looking at, I mean, and not to say that I don't have moments where it's like, I don't want this to change. I like it just the way it is. But if I really think about it, it's stifling and restrictive. So really being able to drop fully into allowing for change to constantly happen can be quite comforting if you can really get there. And I haven't, because like I said, there are some things I'm happy that, you know, they could just stay the way they are. And then there are a whole lot of things in my life that I am waiting. When's it going to change? God, I'm waiting. Goddess, I'm waiting. All right. So this direct relationship with the land, and it seems pretty simplistic when we look at it now, but there were times where when man first was on the planet, they would migrate. They would follow the herds. They would go from seashore to mountains and back and harvest as they went along of whatever was available. But then when the society started to kind of anchor down and stay in one place, it became even more prevalent and more aware how important harvest was to survive, because they weren't moving around, they were stationary. And there was a lot of unclarity of how things really worked. One of the stories I heard was that for early man, he believed that the crops had spirits, and that the spirits were the cause for the crops to grow and to die. So they didn't make the whole connection. And so harvest was needed for these spirits to be released so they wouldn't be angry. So man started to figure out, oh, it's really important that I participate in this, that I help with the harvest. Then over time, there was more of an awareness that this dependency, it wasn't just for the plants, but for themselves, because they were staying in one place. And what's interesting is they started, this is kind of the first ritual, was really honoring the plant life and the giving of the land for their survival. And when I started to think about this, I realized, wow, even back then they understood the law of attraction. They might not have understood it, but they were actually acting it out. If they praised and gave gratitude for the harvest yet to come, because they're just in the middle of harvest season at this point, that there wouldn't, that they would receive all they need. They were creating what they needed. They were creating the reality. So the Greeks and Romans, Hebrews, Chinese, pagans, Druids, Egyptians, goddess worshippers, all create a tradition of thankfulness and for their bounty. They did it maybe in a different form and different representations, but the spirit of the ceremony was to set aside a day to reflect on life's blessings remained the same. So there's just a few interesting ones I wanted to share. Maybe not interesting, and maybe you already know, but just a little bit of the history was that all of these cultures recognized that it was a feminine form that was who they were honoring. And it was the fertility goddess that they would honor. And I didn't actually bring an image of a fertility goddess, but everything up there is the fertility goddess. So the ancient Greeks held a ceremony to honor the goddess who taught mankind to tend the soil. And this was around near the time of October. And in November, they would also worship Demeter as the goddess of the grains. And they would have a feast of worship and offerings of corn and cakes and fruits, and even pigs to her to grant that she would grant them a continued harvest for the year, and that harvest would sustain them through the dark times. And then the Romans had a celebration called Ceriella, which was the harvest festival dedicated to the goddess Ceres. And it's C-E-R-E-S. So it's the word that cereal came from. And it was the corn goddess. Honoring, she was a corn goddess. And so they also would do offerings and create a celebration and a Thanksgiving feast around her. And in China and on most of the East Asian cultures, they took it a different direction. They took it and honored the moon goddess. And the reason they honored the moon goddess was as we all know, this last moon, how powerful and bright and big she is, she would rise just as sun was setting. And what she created was she created light at night so they could continue their harvest, because there's this challenge. You've got this field full of stuff ready to be harvested and you've run out of daylight, and it was when there weren't tractors with big lights and things like that. So the recognition of what a gift. Spirit has come and offered us assistance by having this amazing moon shine and make it so that harvest can happen. She was also called the moon goddess of immortality because she offered rejuvenation through the water and through the energy of the moon. This time of fall equinox was also considered the birthday of the moon, and special moon cakes would be baked that were round and yellow and stamped and honoring they would share with each other to celebrate this amazing gift of this light that would come in the dark. And they also would have feasts and Thanksgiving and gather together. It was really important to come together. And if you think about it, most cultures in times of old, before there was electricity, it was crucial as the darkness came to come together. One, to create community and to have support to get through the dark times. But the other was to really ask for Spirit's protection and guidance as the dark times came. So in the East Asian cultures, they would pray to the moon goddess, and they would ask her for conceptual and material satisfaction. So they would ask for a baby to come, or a new relationship, or just good fortune and longevity. These all would then germinate through the dark times and then come to fruition in the spring and summer. So the pagans, the Wiccans, and the Druids also all marked fall equinox. You know, the people of the land understood these cycles. And as I said, it was the second harvest time, and there would be honoring of and acknowledging the fruits of the earth and the goodness and sustenance that Gaia offered. In the goddess tradition, we also saw this as a great time for Thanksgiving. But there's another level to it, and I'm sure maybe there was multiple levels, as with all ceremony. But one of the things that we really spend the time looking at is the preparation to embrace the mysteries of the dark time, and to really prepare ourselves. How can we step into it willingly, without fear and hesitation? Another part of what Mabon celebration includes is retrospection, looking back at the fruits of our labors, remembering what our heart's desires were that we planted and intended to birth at springtime, and how we nurtured them and hoped for them to flourish and grow through summer. So we would sit back and look at what came to those intentions. Did they just kind of dissolve, or did they come to fruition but different than we intended? And through that, a lot of stuff can come up. You know, a lot of disappointment. Wow, I really intended this last spring, and look what happened. Shit, it didn't happen. Or it happened in a way that was not what I intended. It can bring up a lot of despair when you worked so hard at something and it still didn't come out as you had hoped. And so when we look at harvest, it isn't just acknowledging all the gifts we've gotten, but it's also recognizing that we carry forward what doesn't serve us, which is stress around disappointment and anxiety and all the things that we wanted that didn't happen. So every ritual comes with a time to release, because you can't celebrate if you're carrying around a lot of discord in your system. I mean, you can fake it, which I guess a lot of people do. But to truly drop into the celebration and the gratitude of the Sabbath or the High Holy Day or the meaning of what the ritual is about, you first have to let go of what's holding you back. And so Reverend Janet is going to talk to us a little bit about some new concepts she's had around a way to look at stress and to deal with stress. Because we want to celebrate, but first we have to really acknowledge that we might have some things that are obstacles in our way to that celebration. Blessed be.
I just invite us to take a nice deep breath and breathe in what our beautiful Reverend April brought forth. She brought forth to us a feast of different cultures, a feast of different traditions that unify us as human beings. And what April was talking about, which is so powerful, is that at the Center for Living with Dying program, we have come up with 4 steps for managing stress and grief. Acknowledge, express, act, and celebrate. And I'll get together with Reverend Dottie and we'll do a whole presentation on these steps. But these steps are the movement that April was referring to. Because when we look at stress, and this is the latest research that is out on stress, when we look at stress, when we experience stress as negative, then we don't recover from it as well. When we look at stress as a positive, in other words, when we look at stress as our bodies responding to the challenges that we are facing, and that our body is meeting those challenges, and our mind and our spirit and our heart, when we see that as a meeting of, then we are in control, not out of control. And this is key with stress and grief. When we're out of control and when we're isolated, those are the 2 things that make it harder, make it more difficult to process. So this latest research, and there's a wonderful book that I'm just starting to read called The Upside of Stress. And actually there is a TED Talk from the author of this book that's really good. Look it up on the internet. It's an incredible TED Talk where she kind of has done some studies. She's a neuroscientist and also a psychologist, and she's done some work with the physiology of stress. And what they discovered in a nutshell is this: if we believe our stress is our body's natural way of meeting the challenge, and if we have a positive frame around that stressful response, our stress response will cause us to live longer. Now, let me tell you about this study. It's very exciting to me because we've known this at the Center for Living with Dying for years, but we didn't know quite how to put it into words. So you know, many of you, that I'm an old ER nurse, right? Okay, so I'm going to get a little nursey on you for a minute. What happens in stress physiologically when we meet a challenge? Blood pressure goes up, pupils dilate, cortisol levels go up, adrenal response goes up, heart rate goes up,
digestion slows down.
Absolutely. All of these things happen so that our body can what?
Run!
Fight, flight, freeze, or respond. And I want to offer that 4th one. Flight, fight, freeze, or respond. So if we're responding, then we are aware, we are in the moment, and we are using all of these resources that our body has kicked in to respond. Not run from, not fight, and not freeze, but to respond. So we're taking that energy to respond in the best way we can, in the moment. Now this is very important in the moment. If we see these stress responses as, oh, my body is taking care of me and helping me to respond to this challenge, then we're going to have an entirely different view. That mind view that we have determines how those stress hormones work. So, acknowledge, express, act, and celebrate. If we do what April's inviting us to do, which is express and release that which is no longer serving us, and then act, we do a ceremonial action step where we transform the pain. We don't take away the pain, we transform the pain into meaning, which feeds us. It is the harvest of our stress. It feeds us to go forward and claim the richness, the harvest of us responding to that stress. Then our stress hormones are going to go down. Oxytocin kicks in. Now, you know, oxytocin is the feel-good hormone, okay? So every time we hug, every time we interact with a person, every time we come together in community, those oxytocin chemicals are brought up, okay? And so at the fire ground of the Valley Fire, we had some of our fire chaplains and CISM people were saying, okay, give me a hug, I need some oxytocin. We were kind of joking about it. But it was a really wonderful way that we're going to bring up those hormones that help us to make meaning out of. So the study basically showed this. It took 4 different groups of people. One group had high stress, but had a high sense of meaning about their stress. The next group had high stress, but didn't believe that stress was good. The third group had low stress, didn't believe that stress was good either. And the fourth group had low stress, but believed that there was meaning in stress. Which group did the best in recovery?
First. No.
The first, not the fourth. The first. The people that had high stress, but had a high meaning quotient, did much better in the aftermath than the low stress who believed that their stress had meaning. So the invitation is not necessarily to pick a job or pick a life that doesn't have any stress. The concept is, and what we want to offer to you, is that you pick what has meaning. Do you remember Carlos Castaneda? Mm-hmm. All paths lead to nowhere. Choose the path with heart. Because when it has heart for you, it has meaning for you. When it has meaning for you, it will give you the harvest of your stress. Thank you. Woo!
So recognizing that all aspects of our beingness are divine, that concept that everything is in divine order from the Courses in Miracles is really the message. It's like stress has a purpose, grief has a purpose, celebration has a purpose. But if we can't really consider that everything is always changing, we don't have to be in fear and stay stuck. So now I'd like to invite us to do a ritual. Because how can April talk and then not be a ritual? And so what we have is some barley, and on the back of your paper is a little piece about the steps of the ritual. And I believe barley is a non-gluten.
No, it's not. It's gluten.
Is it? Okay. So I have some sunflower seeds for those gluten-free gluten people.
Thank you.
So the sunflower seeds are in a little. Here, I'll tell you.
How much barley do we take?
How many should they take?
Two.
Two.
If you happen to get more, you get more. It's not a big
That's
deal.
okay.
Just take 2 and pass it on.
Now, is this what you make bread out of, or
This
beer?
is barley. This is the real stuff.
And yes, it is a beer.
And beer.
And you can make bread.
Beer and bread.
You can also make bread with barley.
I forgot. I didn't take 2.